No, it can't be. That's her scarf. Anya's cry was lost in the biting wind as her eyes, accustomed to the white vastness of Yakutia, fixed on a familiar piece of fabric, lost in the pristine snow. The glacial fury of 71 degrees, 95.8 degrees, lashed her face, but the true cold descended her spine as she saw the deep, desperate footprints leading into the forest's darkness. The howls, once distant, were now a macabre chorus, a death chant that seemed to emanate from the frozen hell itself. Anya ran, her heart beating like a shamanic drum, each step a battle against ice and fear, until the mist parted to reveal the most terrifying scene of her life. A dark circle, a merciless pack of 900 hungry wolves, their eyes gleaming in the twilight, surrounding something or someone. Close enough to see the fragile silhouette in the center of that white hell, Anya barely dared to breathe, fearing what she would find. But what she discovered about her grandmother and the true reason for her survival would forever change her understanding of her people's strength and unbreakable spirit. The fragile silhouette, wrapped in thick furs, was unmistakably that of her grandmother. Anya's heart tightened with a sharp pain, but soon terror gave way to an even greater shock. The old matriarch, blind and vulnerable, was not fallen or helpless. Standing despite the cold that seemed to want to freeze even the soul, she wielded her twisted wooden staff, not as support, but as an extension of her will. Her thin lips were open in a hoarse cry, a guttural melody Anya recognized as an ancestral chant of defiance, an invocation of the steppe spirits. The 900 wolves formed a dense circle, yellow eyes fixed on the small figure. They snarled, scratching the snow, but did not advance. There was a strange hesitation, a forced respect for the invisible strength emanating from the elder. Anya felt a shiver. It wasn't just the cold, but the magnitude of the moment. Her grandmother alone had kept a horde of hungry predators at bay with her presence and the wisdom of the ancestors. Time was running out. The pack, though hesitant, was on the verge of an attack. The scent of fear and hunger was palpable in the icy air. Anya needed to act fast. Her hunter's training and the elder's lessons came to the forefront. She grabbed a handful of sharp stones, inhaled deeply the biting air, and with all her might let out a sharp, wild cry that echoed across the white vastness. At the same time, she threw the stones with precision in opposite directions, creating a dry, cracking sound in the snow. The effect was immediate. Hundreds of heads turned in her direction, their hungry eyes now divided between the imminent prey and the new threat. The distraction worked, a brief moment of confusion. It was all Anya needed. With the agility of a snow lynx, she ran to her grandmother, pushing past the nearest wolves who recoiled. Reaching the old woman, Anya enveloped her in a tight embrace, feeling the tremor in her body, but also the rigidity of her determination. "Grandmother, you're all right," Anya whispered, tears freezing on her eyelids. Her grandmother, wrinkled face marked by the battle against the cold, turned her head to her granddaughter, a faint smile appearing on her cracked lips. "Anya, I knew you would come." Her voice was a thread, but imbued with indomitable strength. As the wolves, now more confused than terrified by Anya's presence, began to regroup, the young YAKUT woman finally understood the depth of the scene she had witnessed. Her intervention had been crucial, yes, the final spark to drive away the predators. But the true marvel was her grandmother's resilience. Blindness was not weakness, but a door to other senses, to a deep connection with the spirit of the land and ancestral teachings. Her grandmother had defended herself not only with her staff and cry, but with an aura of silent strength that had intimidated the pack. The wolves, creatures of instinct, sensed the wisdom and ancestral power emanating from the old woman. Anya felt a wave of pride and admiration. Her grandmother was not just a wise matriarch, she was a beacon of courage, a living testament to the unbreakable spirit of the YAKUT people. That moment, surrounded by hungry eyes and the biting cold, was not just about survival, but about rediscovering strength in the soul, connection with ancestors, and the ability to face the impossible. The priority now was to guide her grandmother away from that deadly encirclement, back to the safety of the village. A challenge that would require all the cunning and courage Anya possessed, but which she knew in her heart they would overcome together. Her grandmother's hand, small and wrinkled, squeezed hers with a firmness that belied her age and vulnerability, a silent pact of survival in the frozen steppes. Her grandmother's hand, small and wrinkled, squeezed hers with a firmness that belied her age and vulnerability, a silent pact of survival in the frozen steppes. Anya felt a new breath, a courage that was not just her own, but the sum of generations of Yakuts who had defied winter. The wolves, though momentarily dispersed, began to stir, their low, menacing growls filling the air. Anya knew she couldn't simply run. Her grandmother, despite her inner strength, lacked the agility to escape 900 hungry predators. Cunning was needed. "Grandmother, let's go slowly, one step at a time," Anya whispered, her voice firm. "Trust me." She positioned her grandmother slightly behind her, using her own body as a shield. Slowly, she began to retreat, maintaining eye contact with the nearest wolves. She remembered her father's lessons. Never turn your back on a predator. Show that you are part of the landscape, but also strong. With her grandmother's staff in one hand and the other holding the old woman, Anya began to tap the staff rhythmically on the icy ground, creating a constant, unsettling sound. It wasn't a sound of threat, but of presence, of unwavering determination. The wolves, accustomed to silent hunting, seemed confused by that ritual. They retreated a step when Anya advanced one, maintaining their distance. Every few meters, Anya would stop, turn to her grandmother and give her a reassuring smile, though her eyes were filled with fierce vigilance. "We're almost there, grandmother. Soon we'll smell the village smoke." Her grandmother, head held high, seemed to absorb her granddaughter's energy. Her blindness, far from being an impediment, seemed to sharpen her perception of the environment, feeling the vibrations of the ground, the scent of the wind, the tension in the air. The journey back was a test of endurance. The 71 degrees, 95, 8 degree, cold bit at every exposed inch of skin, turning breath into clouds of ice. The snow, once a white canvas, now seemed like a minefield of invisible traps. Anya guided her grandmother carefully, avoiding crevices and deeper snowdrifts. With each step, her grandmother murmured words of encouragement, ancient stories about the resilience of the Yakuts, about how the human spirit was stronger than any winter. "Remember, Anya," her grandmother said, her voice hoarse, "the cold can freeze the flesh, but never the heart. It is in the warmth of our spirit that we find the true flame." Anya felt the fatigue in her muscles, but her grandmother's words were a balm for her soul. She realized she wasn't just saving her grandmother. She was being guided by her wisdom, by her unwavering faith. The connection between them was palpable, an invisible line of strength that united them against the relentless vastness. Finally, after what seemed an eternity, the smell of burning wood smoke reached Anya's nose, a sign of hope that made her quicken her pace. The wolves, sensing the village's proximity and the two women's determination, began to disperse, vanishing like shadows into the mist. They had been defeated not by brute force, but by resilience and cunning. As they approached the first cabins, the flickering lights from the windows were like falling stars, promising warmth and safety. The villagers, who had already lost hope, rushed out upon seeing the two stumbling figures. Cries of relief and surprise echoed in the icy air. Anya and her grandmother were met with tight hugs, tears, and words of gratitude. Her grandmother's face, though pale and tired, radiated a deep serenity. She had faced death and returned, not as a victim, but as a silent warrior. Anya, observing the scene, felt a warmth spread through her chest, a warmth stronger than the fireplace fire. She had saved her grandmother, yes, but her grandmother had shown her something even deeper, the true essence of courage, ancestral wisdom, and the unbreakable strength of the YAKUT spirit, which flourished even in the harshest winters, a lesson she would carry forever in her heart. The village, united in relief, celebrated not only the return, but the reaffirmation of its own resilience. The warmth of the fireplace fire, crackling in the main cabin, enveloped Anya and her grandmother like an embrace. The scent of tea and smoked meat filled the air, a blessed contrast to the biting cold outside. Seated on soft furs near the fire, the two women were the center of attention. The villagers' faces, once marked by worry, now shone with a mix of relief and admiration. Children, wide-eyed, peaked, pointing at the grandmother as a living legend. Anya held her grandmother's wrinkled hand, feeling the warmth slowly returning to her cold fingers. A reverent silence in the cabin, broken by the crackling wood and whispers of gratitude. The village elder, a man with a deep voice and kind eyes, approached them with reverence. "Grandmother Anika," he said, his voice choked, "you have shown us the true strength of our people. Your spirit is a beacon for us all." Her grandmother merely nodded, a serene smile on her lips. Her blind eyes, though they could not see, seemed to perceive the soul of each person. Anya felt a lump in her throat. It was more than a rescue, a celebration of life, human connection, and ancestral wisdom. She watched her grandmother, frail, yet with an aura of power that had driven away the wolf horde. Her grandmother's blindness, once seen as vulnerability, had revealed itself as a source of deep perception, a harmony with the world that most would never achieve. The staff, once a support, was now a symbol of her unbreakable will. Later, as the village settled down, Anya sat beside her grandmother, who rested on her fur bed. The lamplight cast dancing shadows on the walls. "Grandmother," Anya whispered, "I still don't understand. How did you do it? How did the wolves... They didn't attack you?" Her grandmother opened her eyes, a glimmer of wisdom in them. "My child," she began, her voice soft, "fear is a scent that wolves detect. But determination, the calm in one's heart, they sense that too. I didn't see, but I felt their presence, their hunger. And I remembered the teachings of our ancestors. The cry I used was not of fear, but of defiance, of connection with the spirits. And the staff, it was an extension of my will, an invisible shield." She continued, "They hesitated, Anya. They felt the strength that came from within. It wasn't physical strength, but the strength of the YAKUT spirit, which refuses to be broken by cold and hunger. Your arrival, my love, was the final spark, the push for them to disperse. But you gave me the chance to show that hope does not die, even without sight." Anya listened, absorbing every word. The lesson was profound. It wasn't just about surviving, but how one lives, how one faces the impossible with faith and a soul connected to its roots. Anya squeezed her grandmother's hand again, feeling the roughness of her skin and the wisdom that emanated from her. She had set out to save her grandmother, but in the process, her grandmother had saved her, teaching her an essential truth about resilience. Yakutia's winter was relentless, but her people's spirit was even stronger. That day, under the white mantle, Anya had not only rescued a life, she had rediscovered the unwavering strength of the YAKUT spirit, the ancestral wisdom that defies blindness, and the courage that resides in every heart, proving that true resilience flourishes even in the harshest winters. Anya felt the weight of those words like a warm cloak on her soul, more comforting than any animal fur. The truth of that day was not the danger overcome, but the revelation of a strength she barely understood. She looked at her grandmother, who now slept peacefully, her face serene in the lamplight. Annika was not just a blind, frail grandmother. She was a guardian of ancient secrets, the personification of resilience. Anya rose, her heart filled with gratitude and a new reverence. In the days that followed, the village buzzed with the story of the rescue. It was not the courage of Anya, the hunter who defied winter and the wolves, but that of Annika, the blind matriarch who, with ancestral wisdom, had kept death at bay. Children and elders looked at the grandmother with admiration, nodding in approval. The story spread, but it brought warmth to the hearts of the community. Anya, however, felt the greatest transformation within herself. Before, she saw herself as her grandmother's protector. Now she realized that Annika's vulnerability was, paradoxically, her greatest strength. Blindness had sharpened other senses, deepened her connection with the invisible world of spirits. Anya began to see the world in a new way, with heart and soul, seeking wisdom in the silence of the snow, in the distant howl of the wind, in the silent strength of her community. She spent hours beside her grandmother, listening to stories about the importance of patience, observation, and faith. Annika, with a soft, hoarse voice, taught Anya that true courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it, to find inner strength. Our ancestors, her grandmother explained, did not fear winter. They knew that just as ice breaks, difficulties shape us, make us stronger. Anya began to apply these lessons in her daily life. When hunting, she relied not only on her keen eyesight, but also on subtle sounds, on the scents the wind carried, on the vibrations of the ground. She felt more connected to the land, to the animals, to the rhythm of life in Yakutia. The experience with the wolves and her grandmother had been a rite of passage, an awakening. She was no longer just a young hunter. She was a guardian of wisdom, a bridge between her people's past and future. The village felt the change. Annika's presence was a constant reminder of strength. The story of the blind old woman who faced 900 wolves became a campfire tale, a living legend that inspired everyone to face their own winters with the same determination. Anya's selflessness, who had risked her life, and Annika's resilience, who had refused to yield, wove a new thread into the rich tapestry of the YAKUT community. Anya realized that true wealth lay in human connections, in shared wisdom, in strength drawn from love. Winter was still relentless, but now Anya and her village faced these challenges with a new and strong perspective, with the certainty that the YAKUT spirit was unbreakable. Grandmother Annika, in her blindness, had opened everyone's eyes to the brightest light, the light of hope and human resilience. The light of human hope and resilience, kindled by Annika, continued to shine brightly in the days that followed, warming the village's hearts against the relentless cold. The community, once immersed in the arduous routine of survival, now carried a new flame in their spirits. Conversations around the campfires were no longer just about hunting or scarcity, but about the grandmother's silent courage and Anya's selfless bravery. Children, wide-eyed with admiration, viewed Annika with an almost mystical reverence, and Anya with an admiration bordering on heroism, a young woman who had defied the impossible. Anya, in turn, felt that the rescue had been just the beginning of a deeper journey. The experience had transformed her, not just as a hunter, but as a person, forging a new perspective on life and death in the steppes. She spent even more time with her grandmother, not just to care for her, but to absorb every fragment of her wisdom. Annika, seated on her fur bed, her wrinkled hands weaving wicker baskets with surprising dexterity, shared stories and teachings that spanned generations. "Anya," she would say, her voice soft as the whisper of wind on snow, "true strength lies not in fighting nature, but in dancing with it, in understanding its rhythms, its lessons, and in finding our own melody within its vast symphony." Anya observed her grandmother's slow and precise gestures, the way her fingers, though blind, found each wicker fiber with a certainty that sight rarely offered. It was as if Annika's hands had eyes of their own, guided by a wisdom that transcended common senses and connected directly with the essence of things. Anya began to imitate this patience, this attention to detail in her own tasks. When preparing furs for the cold, she felt the texture of the wool, the weight of the leather, the way each stitch needed to be perfect to offer maximum protection against the 71 degree, 95, 8 degree. It was no longer a mechanical task, but an act of respect for the animal's life and her family's safety, a link to tradition. The village men, who once saw Anya as a promising hunter, now looked at her with new and deep respect. They noticed the change in her gaze, the depth in her questions, the calmness in her actions. She hunted not just to feed, but to honor the spirit of the steppe and the ancestors. On a particularly cold afternoon, as the wind howled outside like a lone wolf, the village elder, a man with a grave demeanor and a voice laden with concern, sought out Anya. "Anya," he began, his voice low and hoarse, "we have a serious problem. Our traps have been empty for days. Winter is crueler than usual, and the animals seem to have disappeared from the region." Anya's heart tightened at the news. Hunger was an enemy as relentless as the 900 wolves she had faced, and far more insidious. "And what shall we do, Elder?" she asked, her voice low but firm. The elder sighed deeply, his tired eyes fixed on the flickering fireplace fire. "We need someone with your courage, with your new vision. Anya, someone who can go beyond what we see with our eyes, who can feel what the earth tells us in its silence." He paused dramatically, then looked directly at Anya, a glimmer of renewed hope in his eyes. "We need you, Anya, to find the way, to guide our hunters to a new source of food before winter completely defeats us." Anya felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, an immense burden, but also a wave of unwavering determination. She thought of her grandmother's words, of dancing with nature, of the strength that came from within, from the connection with the YAKUT spirit. It was no longer just about saving a life, but about saving the entire village, the essence of her people. "I will go, Elder," Anya replied, her voice resonating with a conviction that surprised even herself. "But I will not go alone. I will take with me the wisdom I have learned, the wisdom of our grandmother." She knew that Annika, even without leaving the yurt, would be her most valuable guide, a beacon of ancestral knowledge in the white and treacherous immensity. The village depended on her, and she depended on the wisdom her grandmother had unveiled. The next challenge would be even greater, but Anya felt ready, armed with an unwavering faith in the YAKUT spirit and the strength of her people. The next morning, even before the sun dared to peek over the icy horizon, Anya was already awake. Her grandmother's yurt was her first destination. Annika, though blind, seemed to sense her granddaughter's presence, her head slightly tilted. "Are you going, my child?" the old woman asked, her voice a whisper. Anya nodded, kneeling beside the bed. "Yes, grandmother, but I need your sight, your ears, your heart." Annika smiled, and her sightless eyes seemed to glow with deep understanding. She began to speak, not with direct instructions, but with riddles, with stories of ancient times, of patterns in the ice that few noticed, of winds that carried secrets of forgotten migrations. "When winter bites deepest," Annika said, "the frozen rivers sing a different song. Do not look for footprints in the snow, but for the melody in the ice, the tremor the earth holds." Anya absorbed every word, every gesture of her grandmother, as if engraving an invisible map in her mind. At dawn, Anya prepared herself. She put on her warmest furs, sharpened her knife, and took her spear. 3 of the village's most experienced hunters, strong and silent men, awaited her. Their faces were marked by worry, but also by renewed hope as they saw the determination in Anya's eyes. "Let's go, brothers," she said, her voice firm. "The steppe awaits us." The journey began under a grey, oppressive sky. The cold was excruciating, penetrating layers of fur. The hunters, accustomed to hunting in familiar lands, followed Anya with a mix of respect and skepticism. She led them away from the usual trails to a more rugged and desolate terrain, where the wind sculpted snow mountains and the silence was broken only by the distant howl of the wind. After days of fruitless searching, discouragement began to set in among the men. Provisions dwindled, and the tracks of any animal were non-existent. "Anya!" One of the hunters, a sturdy man named Boris, murmured, "We are lost. There is nothing here. Our ancestors never hunted this far." Anya felt the weight of doubt, but her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. "Do not look for footprints in the snow, but for the melody in the ice." She stopped, closed her eyes for a moment, and concentrated. She felt the vibrations of the ground, the breath of the wind, the metallic scent of the air. Nothing. She opened her eyes and her gaze swept across the desolate landscape. It was then that, amidst the vast ice plain, something caught her eye. It was not a footprint, nor an animal track, but an unusual formation in the ice of a frozen river, a series of concentric fissures that stretched for hundreds of meters, as if something immense had moved beneath. It was her grandmother's melody in the ice, a sign that defied logic. The hunters saw nothing but cracked ice. "There!" Anya pointed, her voice filled with new conviction. "Grandmother told me about this. It's a sign that something big, something very big, is moving under the ice, or has broken the ice in a place it shouldn't." The hunters approached, skeptical, but Anya's expression was unwavering. She knelt, touched the ice, and felt a subtle, almost imperceptible vibration. It wasn't the track of a wolf or a common moose. It was something much heavier, more powerful, an unexpected turning point. The fissures were not random. They formed a path, a map to a new and unknown hunting territory, perhaps for a herd of wood bison, gigantic and rare animals that rarely ventured so far south. Hope, once dying, rekindled in the hunter's eyes. Anya had found the way, guided by wisdom that transcended sight. The hunters, Boris in the lead, approached the fissures with caution, their experienced eyes trying to decipher the mystery Anya saw with such clarity. The ice, thick and ancient, seemed unyielding, but the concentric marks were undeniable, like deep scars on the white surface. "It's an illusion, Anya," Boris said, his voice choked by cold and frustration. "The ice moves. It breaks in strange ways. There's nothing here but more snow and cold." Anya was not deterred. She knelt again, not just touching the ice, but pressing her ear against it, closing her eyes. The silence of the steppe was almost absolute, but for Anya it was full of murmurs. She felt the subtle vibration, a distant but persistent echo that seemed to come from the depths. It was as if the earth itself was breathing. "It's not an illusion, Boris," she replied, her voice calm but imbued with a certainty that made them hesitate. "It's the song grandmother taught me, the song of something that moves with a force that defies winter." She stood and began to follow the fissures, not in a straight line, but in a pattern that seemed random to the men. Yet to her was an invisible map. The hunters, reluctant, followed her. The sun, when it finally appeared, cast a pale and deceptive light over the landscape, making every shadow seem a danger, every snowdrift a trap. The wind picked up, whipping ice flakes against their faces, making visibility even more difficult. Hours dragged on. The cold seemed to intensify with each step, and hunger began to gnaw at the men's determination. Their gazes, once filled with faint hope, now carried the weight of despair. "Anya, please," another hunter, named Dmitri, pleaded, his voice almost a whimper. "We cannot continue. Our legs are heavy. Our hearts are tired. There is nothing in this direction, only emptiness." Anya stopped, turning to face the men. Her eyes, though tired, shone with unwavering determination. She knew their faith was waning, but her own, forged in the fire of experience with the wolves and in Anika's wisdom, was a beacon. "Grandmother told me that true strength lies not in fighting nature, but in dancing with it," she reminded them, her voice soft but firm. "And nature is showing us the way, even if we don't see it with our eyes." She pointed to a distant rise, a hill covered by a darker, almost bluish layer of ice. "There," she said, "I feel something, a different scent in the air, a density that isn't just snow. It's the scent of life, of strength." The men looked at the hill, then at Anya, torn between exhaustion and the strange conviction in her voice. Boris, the most skeptical, sighed, but a glimmer of curiosity lit up in his eyes. Anya's faith was contagious, a flickering flame in the midst of darkness. They resumed their march, each step a battle against cold and doubt. When they finally reached the hill, what they saw made everyone's heart pound in their chests. There were no visible animals, but the snow was covered with gigantic marks, deep and irregular craters, as if enormous stones had fallen from the sky. They were footprints, but of a size none of them had ever seen, each as large as a sled. The hill's ice was broken into colossal pieces, revealing dark, trampled soil that exhaled a subtle vapor into the icy air. The scent Anya had felt was strong now, an earthy and wild, unmistakable odor. They were not wolves, nor common moose. They were wood bison, legendary and almost mythical creatures of a size and weight that defied the most fertile imagination and which were believed to be extinct in that region. Grandmother was right. The melody in the ice had guided them to a treasure, a promise of life for the village, a miracle in the frozen steppes. The silence that followed the discovery of the gigantic footprints was more eloquent than any cry. The hunters, accustomed to deciphering the steppes' secrets, were paralyzed, their eyes wide, fixed on the craters in the snow. Boris, the oldest and most experienced, slowly knelt, passing his gloved hand over one of the marks. It was so deep that his palm barely covered it, and the dark, damp earth at the bottom exhaled a residual warmth, a sign that the creature had passed through very recently. Disbelief mingled with awe on his face. "Wood bison," he murmured, his voice hoarse, almost a reverent whisper. "I never thought I'd see a track like this again. Our grandparents told stories, but they were just that, stories." Dmitri and the other hunters approached, each touching the footprints with a mix of awe and fascination. The magnitude of the discovery was overwhelming. They were not just large animals, they were colossi, living legends that Yakutia's relentless winter should have swept away centuries ago. The promise of meat and furs for the village, which once seemed a distant dream, now materialized before them. An unexpected gift from nature itself, guided by the wisdom of a blind old woman. Anya watched the men, a soft smile playing on her lips. Exhaustion still weighed on her shoulders, but the satisfaction of having validated her grandmother's faith was a balm for her soul. She felt the energy of the place, the imposing presence of these ancestral creatures. It was as if the steppe had kept a secret just for them, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. "Grandmother knew," she said, her voice firm, cutting through the reverent silence. She felt the song in the ice, the breath of the earth. It's not an illusion. Boris stood, his grey eyes fixed on Anya, now devoid of any skepticism, filled with deep respect. "You guided us, Anya," he said, his voice choked. "You showed us what our own eyes could not see. Anika's wisdom is a light stronger than the midday sun." The other hunters nodded in unison, their expressions reflecting the same admiration. Doubt had been replaced by an unwavering faith in the young huntress and the matriarch who inspired her. But the joy of discovery soon gave way to the gravity of the challenge. Finding the bison was only the first step. Hunting them was another story. These creatures were known for their strength and ferocity, capable of crushing a man with a single blow of their massive head. There were more than 5, as the footprints indicated, a herd that represented both salvation and immense danger. The village's hunger was a heavy burden, but the lives of his companions were even more precious. Anya felt the weight of responsibility again, but this time it was not an overwhelming burden, but a clear purpose. She knew her grandmother had not guided her there for a sacrifice, but for a victory. "They are close," Anya stated, pointing to a depression in the terrain where the vapor was denser. "We need to be cunning, like our ancestors. We cannot face them with brute force, but with intelligence and respect." Her eyes swept the landscape, searching for the signs her grandmother had taught her to see, to feel. The wind, the slope of the terrain, the way the pale light filtered through the clouds. She was ready to dance with nature once more, guided by ancestral wisdom to save her people. The hunt would be the greatest test of her life, a challenge that would require all her courage and deep connection with the YAKUT spirit. The village waited, and Anya would not fail. The hunters, still stunned by the sight of the colossal footprints, felt the weight of reality crush their initial euphoria. Wood bison, legends, but legends that now represented a chance at life or certain death. Boris, his face grave, looked at Anya. "They are immense, Anya. Our spears and bows, they will be like needles against rocks." Fear was palpable in his voice, an echo of the doubt that still lingered in the men's hearts. Dmitri and the third hunter, a young man named Kyle, nodded, their eyes fixed on the depression, where the vapor rose denser, like the breath of a sleeping monster. Anya felt the tension, but Anika's voice resonated in her mind, clear as an ice bell. "Do not fight nature, dance with it." She turned to the men, her brown eyes fixed on each of them, conveying a calm that seemed to defy the cold and imminent danger. "We will not face them with brute force, brothers," she began, her voice soft but imbued with authority. "Our ancestors taught us cunning, patience. Grandmother told me about the guiding wind, about the singing ice. We will use the steppe to our advantage." She pointed to the depression. "They are there to shelter from the wind, to conserve heat. We need to surround them, but not aggressively. We need to guide them." Her gestures were precise, drawing in the air the plan forming in her mind. "Boris, you and Kel will flank from the right, keeping yourselves against the wind. Dmitri, you and I will go from the left, using the snow formations as cover, not to attack, but to direct." The men listened, their expressions slowly shifting from skepticism to cautious curiosity. Anya's faith, nurtured by ancestral wisdom, was a force they could not ignore. Anya's plan was not one of direct confrontation, but of manipulation, of understanding the behavior of these gigantic creatures. She explained how the wind, which now howled furiously, could be an ally, carrying their scent away from the bison, and how the uneven terrain, which once seemed an obstacle, would be an advantage for a silent approach. "They are powerful, but they are also creatures of habit," Anya continued. "If we push them to the right place, to the thinner ice that grandmother taught me to identify, we can isolate one of them, one that is further from the herd, perhaps an older or younger one." The idea was audacious, almost unthinkable. Hunting a wood bison was a feat for many experienced hunters, not for 4, much less for a group led by a young woman. But hunger in the village was a more terrifying spectre than any beast. Boris, though still apprehensive, felt a spark of hope. "And the thin ice, Anya? How will we find it?" Anya smiled, a glint in her eyes. "Grandmother taught me to feel. The melody in the ice isn't just about the cracks, but about the hollow sound, the different vibration. We need to be in tune with the earth. With a nod, Anya gave the signal. The hunters moved, each feeling the cold penetrate their furs, but also the adrenaline warming their veins. The wind whipped the snow, creating a white veil that offered cover. They crawled, crept, their movements as silent as the falling snowflakes. The silence was broken only by the howl of the wind and the accelerated beating of their own hearts. As they approached the depression, the air filled with a strong, earthy smell, the unmistakable odor of bison. And then they saw them. More than 5, as the footprints indicated, but the sight was even more impressive than imagination could conceive. They were mountains of dark fur, with massive horns and eyes that seemed like guardians of a forgotten era. Vapor exhaled from their nostrils, creating ghostly halos in the icy air. One of the bison, a colossal male with an ice beard, raised its head, sniffing the air. Anya's heart leaped. The moment of truth was approaching, and the entire village depended on that act of faith and courage. The colossal bison, its breath a plume of white in the frigid air, turned its massive head towards them, its small, deep eyes fixed on something the hunters could not see. A low, guttural growl escaped its throat, a sound that made the ice vibrate beneath their feet and blood run cold in the men's veins. Boris and Kyle froze. Their spears gripped tightly, but their hands trembled slightly. Dmitri, beside Anya, swallowed hard, fear etched on his face. The sight of the bison, so close, so imposing, was overwhelming. They seemed like living mountains, capable of sweeping everything in their path with a single movement. Anya, however, did not hesitate. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind, not as a whisper, but as a clear command. "Feel the earth, Anya. Read the wind. Do not fight, guide." She felt the vibration of the ice, the subtle tremor that indicated the presence of something weaker, more unstable beneath the surface. The male bison, the herd leader, took a step forward, scraping its hoof on the ice, a warning that seemed to resonate across the entire steppe. "Now!" Anya whispered, her voice surprisingly firm, cutting through the icy air with unquestionable authority. "Boris, Kyle, flank. Keep yourselves against the wind. Dmitri, come with me." The men, though terrified by the magnitude of the beasts, obeyed. Anya's faith, forged in her own experience and ancestral wisdom, was a beacon amidst the panic that threatened to paralyze them. Boris and Kyle began to move, crawling through the snow, using the undulations of the terrain as cover, their movements slow and careful. The wind, an unexpected ally, carried their scents away from the herd, allowing for a more audacious approach than they would ever have imagined. Anya and Dmitri, in turn, advanced from the left, their movements calculated and silent. Anya felt every breath of the wind, every change in the texture of the ice beneath her boots, as if the earth itself was speaking to her. She guided Dmitri with minimal gestures, pointing to the snow formations that offered the best camouflage. The plan was not one of confrontation, but of persuasion, of directing the giants towards the weak point her grandmother had taught her to identify. The male bison, still alert, watched the direction where Boris and Kyle were moving, its attention divided between the two invisible threats. The herd, sensing the leader's unease, began to stir, their massive bodies moving slowly, raising clouds of snow and vapor. It was a slow and dangerous ballet where one false step could mean the end of all hope. Anya identified a younger bison, slightly separated from the main group, grazing near an area where the ice seemed darker, with an almost translucent sheen. Her grandmother's melody in the ice, the hollow sound, the different vibration, was stronger there. It was the exact spot she sought, the place where nature's resilience met its fragility. "Dmitri," she whispered, pointing to the younger bison. "That one. We need to isolate it. Make noise, but don't attack. Just direct it." Dmitri nodded, his eyes wide, but filled with a new and strange determination. He picked up a stone and threw it forcefully in the opposite direction of the young bison, making it ricochet off the ice with a sharp sound. The sound, amplified by the silence of the steppe, caught the attention of some bison, who turned towards the source of the noise with a mix of curiosity and irritation. Boris and Kale, on the other side, also began to make noise, striking their spears against the ice, creating a cacophony that confused the herd. The bison, creatures of habit and hierarchy, began to move, driven by confusion and the instinct of self-preservation. Anya's plan was working. They were guiding, not fighting. The young bison, with its eyes wide with fear and confusion, advanced hesitantly onto the darker ice surface. Each step was a test for the thin layer separating it from the icy waters below. The hunters, hidden, watched with bated breath, their hearts pounding to the frantic rhythm of imminent danger. The wind howled, but the silence between them was deafening. Filled only with tension, Anya felt the ice vibrate beneath her boots, a different, hollower murmur that grandmother Annika had taught her to recognize. It was the spot. "Now," Anya whispered, her voice almost inaudible, but imbued with an urgency the men instinctively understood. Boris and Kale, on the other side, struck their spears against the ice with a dry, sharp sound, an ancestral war cry that echoed across the steppe. Dmitri, beside Anya, threw more stones, creating a calculated distraction. The male bison, leader of the herd, roared in fury, but confusion had already set in. The young bison, in a panic, took a stronger, more desperate step precisely onto the weakest point. With a deafening crack, like a giant tree breaking in half, the ice gave way. A crater opened beneath the animal's hooves, and the young bison, with a bellow of terror, sank into the dark, icy waters. The startled herd retreated in disarray, their massive bodies quickly disappearing into the intensifying blizzard. The shock of the fall made the earth tremble. The young bison struggled desperately, its front legs trying to grasp the edges of the ice, but the weight of its colossal body was too much. The icy water swallowed it, and vapor rose in dense clouds, mixing with the frigid air. "Quick!" Anya shouted, running to the edge of the crater without hesitation. "We need to tie it up before it tires, or the ice gives way further." Boris, Dmitri, and Kale, overcoming fear and awe, followed her. They knew time was crucial. The animal, though trapped, was still a force of nature capable of crushing anyone who approached. Anya, with surprising agility, threw a thick rope made of reindeer hide that she had prepared. The end of the rope, with a well-made noose, fell over one of the bison's massive horns. "Pull!" she ordered, and the men, with all the strength of their exhausted bodies, began to pull. The ice groaned dangerously beneath their feet, but adrenaline propelled them. The bison struggled, but the cold water and effort began to sap its strength. Its eyes, once filled with panic, now showed a painful resignation. Anya ran to the other side of the crater, throwing another rope, this time aiming for the other horn. Kyle held it firmly, while Boris and Dmitri continued to pull the first. It was a ballet of strength and strategy, a desperate dance against time and relentless nature. Slowly, inch by inch, they managed to secure the animal, preventing it from submerging completely. The colossal body of the bison was partially submerged, but now it was secure, trapped by the ropes, exhausted and immobilized. The hunters fell to their knees in the snow, panting, their bodies trembling from cold and pure relief. The danger had not yet passed, but the greatest challenge had been overcome. The village would have food. Anya's faith, Annika's wisdom, had prevailed. Boris looked at Anya, his eyes moist. "You did it, Anya," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "You saved us." Anya, though exhausted, felt a wave of warmth spread through her chest. It was not just the victory of the hunt, but the validation of a deep connection, of a heritage that transcended the visible. She looked at the bison, now almost motionless, and felt a pang of sadness for the life that would be taken, but also immense gratitude for the lives that would be saved. The steppe in its cruelty also offered its miracles, guided by the melody in the ice and the courage of a YAKUT heart. The climax had arrived, and with it the promise of a new dawn for the village. Exhaustion was a heavy cloak upon the hunters, but the sight of the bison, now firmly tied and partially out of the icy water, ignited a new energy in their hearts. They knew the task was far from over. Dmitri and Kale, their hands still trembling, began to reinforce the ropes, while Boris and Anya discussed the next steps. The intense cold was a constant reminder that they could not delay. The bison meat, an invaluable treasure, needed to be prepared and transported quickly before the ice and predators claimed it. "We cannot drag it whole," Boris said, his voice firmer now, his admiration for Anya evident in his gaze. "It's too heavy. We need to butcher it here. It's the way of our ancestors." Anya nodded, the decision already formed in her mind. It was arduous work, but necessary. They drew their hunting knives sharp and ready. Respect for the animal was palpable in every movement. It was a trade, one life for the survival of many. Under Anya's silent leadership, they worked with impressive efficiency, their movements coordinated and precise, even with numb fingers and protesting muscles. The scent of blood and fresh meat mingled with the icy air, a primal aroma of life and death that the steppe knew well. Hours passed, marked only by the diminishing light and the intensifying blizzard. When they finished, the bison was divided into manageable pieces, carefully wrapped in furs to protect them from the cold and snow. The furs, thick and warm, would be an additional gift for the village, a shield against the relentless winter. They loaded the meat and furs onto their sleds, the weight immense, but the hope they carried was even greater. The return to the village was a silent march of triumph. The blizzard had subsided, and the pale moon peeked between the clouds, lighting their way. Each step was a victory against fatigue, each breath a reminder of the life they had secured. When the first lights of the village appeared on the horizon, a murmur of voices and the barking of dogs greeted them. The villagers, who had spent days in anguish, came out of their homes, their faces marked by worry. But when they saw the loaded sleds and the exhausted yet victorious hunters, a cry of joy and relief echoed across the steppe. Children ran, women cried with happiness, and the older men approached, their eyes full of gratitude. Anika, seated at the entrance of her yurt, raised her head. Though blind, she felt the vibration of joy, the scent of fresh meat, the warmth of renewed hope. Anya ran to her, kneeling, and hugged her grandmother tightly. "We did it, grandmother," she whispered, warm tears streaming down her face. "Your wisdom guided us." Anika smiled, a smile that lit up her wrinkled face. "I never doubted my little star," she said, her voice soft but imbued with deep satisfaction. "The melody in the ice always shows us the way, and you, Anya, have learned to dance with it." The village was saved, not by brute force, but by cunning, by faith, and by the unwavering connection between a young woman and her grandmother's ancestral wisdom. The celebration that followed was a balm for exhausted souls. Fires crackled in the yurts, spreading an inviting warmth that pushed back the steppe's cold. The scent of roasting bison meat filled the air, an aroma of hope and abundance that hadn't been felt in a long time. Children, their eyes shining with joy, watched the hunters with a new reverence, especially Anya. Anika, seated in her place of honor, felt the warmth of the fire and the happy buzz of the community. Her wrinkled hand found Anya's, squeezing it affectionately. "Your courage has lit a flame that will not be extinguished, my granddaughter," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "You not only brought food, but renewed faith in our hearts. The village remembers your deeds, Anya, and respects you." Anya felt a lump in her throat. Her grandmother's words were more precious than any praise. She had faced the terror of the wolves and the imposing presence of the bison, guided by a wisdom she now felt flowing in her own veins. It was not just her strength, but the strength of generations of Yakuts that propelled her. She looked at Boris, Dmitri, and Kale, who were sitting nearby, their faces marked by fatigue, but illuminated by a silent pride. They had trusted her, a young woman, and together they had overcome the impossible. In the following days, the village worked together. The bison meat was carefully stored, the furs cleaned, and prepared to be transformed into warm clothing and blankets. Winter was still long, but the threat of hunger had been averted. Nights were filled with stories, not just of the bison hunt, but also of Anya's journey to find Anika, and how the blind old woman had faced the 900 wolves with a staff and an ancestral cry. The story spread, taking on legendary contours, and Anya saw herself as part of something greater, a guardian of her people's tradition and resilience. The Council of Elders, gathered in the main yurt, summoned Anya. Their faces, once worried, now displayed deep respect. The chief, a man with a grave voice and penetrating gaze, spoke. "Anya, you have proven to all of us that true strength resides not only in muscles or sight, but in the wisdom of the heart and an unwavering spirit. You reminded us that faith in our ancestors and in ourselves is our greatest shield against the harshest winter. You are the melody in the ice, Anya, the hope that sings amidst the storm." Anya felt the weight of responsibility, but also the lightness of acceptance. She had found her place, not as an ordinary hunter, but as a bridge between the past and the future, between ancestral wisdom and the courage of the new generation. The connection with Anika, which was once a dependency, transformed into an equal partnership, a living legacy. Winter continued to punish the steppe with its icy winds and endless blizzards, but Anya's village no longer feared. They had food, warmth, and above all, they had each other. The story of Anya and Anika became a beacon, a reminder that even in the most relentless conditions, human resilience, the strength of family, and ancestral wisdom could flourish, transforming despair into triumph, and cold into an embrace of hope. The frozen steppe of Yakutia, which once seemed a relentless enemy, was now the silent witness to an indomitable spirit, one that danced with nature and found life where others only saw the end. The steppe, with its austere beauty, had transformed in Anya's eyes. No longer danger, but home, a silent teacher that shaped her people's soul. The melody in the ice, Anika's secret, now resonated in Anya's heart, a symphony of life and resilience felt in every snowflake, every breath of wind. The village flourished with renewed energy. Abundant meat ensured food, furs became warm clothing, nights filled with laughter and songs, crackling fires warming bodies and spirits. Anya, once full of doubts, walked with a new posture, head held high, eyes reflecting the vastness of the steppe and its strength. Children followed her, admiring stories of wolves and bison. She was a guardian, a living bridge between ancestral wisdom and future hope. Anika, in her yurt, felt joy vibrate. Her wise smile was a beacon of peace. She knew her mission was accomplished. Anya had absorbed the lessons with her heart. On a cold afternoon, the pale sun painting the horizon, Anika called Anya. "You have found your own melody, my granddaughter," she said. "The steppe teaches us about challenges and triumphs. You faced the harshest winter, and in your heart, summer bloomed." Anya held her grandmother's wrinkled hand, feeling the deep connection. "Your wisdom guided me, grandmother." Anika shook her head. "Wisdom is a seed. You planted it in fertile soil, watered with courage. Now it will grow and nourish everyone." The village, strengthened by the ordeal, looked to the future with confidence. The men, once hesitant, now saw Anya as a born leader, guided by intuition and connection with the land. The women, inspired by Anya's and Anika's resilience, found new strengths. Selflessness and unity became pillars of the community, reminding them that together they would overcome any adversity of winter. Anya, observing the village under the light of the aurora borealis, felt a deep peace. The cold was still intense, but no longer paralyzing. The white vastness of Yakutia was not a frightening void, but a stage for life, for overcoming, for the eternal dance between man and nature. She understood that true strength lay not in dominating the environment, but in understanding it, in harmonizing with its rhythms, and in finding beauty and hope even in the most extreme conditions. The indomitable and resilient Yakut spirit was not just a heritage, but a choice, a way of life that celebrated life in its fullness. And Anya, the young woman who once feared the steppe, was now the living embodiment of that melody, a beacon of hope shining brightly across the frozen steppes of Yakutia, promising that as long as there was a beating heart and a story to be told, life would always find a way, always.